What is up, enthusiasts? It is Flags here, and welcome back to another one of my videos. Enthusiasts from all over the world and the general public alike love to see the newest, tallest, fastest, most inverting coaster. But the records don't stop there. A record that I've been pretty interested in is the world's tallest inversion, as in the world's tallest point on a roller coaster that you can invert or go upside down. I was always interested because I feel like it wasn't talked about anywhere near as much as some of the other records out there. But nonetheless, it's a very interesting record in its own. Imagine saying that you hung upside down higher than any other roller coaster on the planet, whether it be a tall vertical loop or some sort of other inversion. Today we are going to be going back all the way to the 1800s to now to see what the world's tallest inversion on a roller coaster throughout time was. So let's get right into it. This is Cedar Flags, and today we are going to be looking at the history of the tallest inversion record on roller coasters. We are going to be starting a little earlier than you may think. The first modern roller coasters started around the late 1800s, but we are going before then, to Western Europe in September of 1842. It was basically a downward ramp that led into a tight vertical loop, into an upward ramp, and the ride was over. This ride had no upstop wheels, which meant the only thing keeping the rider from falling out was the actual force of the vertical loop. Many people say that this loop was 40 feet, but that is actually the circumference of the loop, so the height was actually only about 12 feet. From the 1840s to the 1890s, we saw no inverting coasters, but in 1895 at Sea Lion Park in New York, we saw the Flip-Flap Railway. This ride was definitely more modern for the time though. It had a lift hill and a turnaround leading into a first drop that led into a 25-foot tall vertical loop. People say that it pulled up to 12 Gs of vertical force. I mean, to be pinned to your seat like that without any upstop wheels, I could not imagine how that would feel. In 1902, the same year this ride closed, a new ride opened at the Pan American Exposition. Designed by the same person as Flip-Flap Railway, this was Loop the Loop. Basically the same design as Flip-Flap Railway, except for a few changes, including it being a dueling coaster and the loop being reprofiled to make the experience a little more comfortable. Probably not to today's standards, but still better than what the Flip-Flap Railway had to offer. From 1906 to 1947, there were no known looping roller coasters. That was until 1948, when Loopingbahn at Wiener Prater opened up in Europe. This broke a new record, and it was the first ever roller coaster to break the 2 inversion barrier. And it also had the only known roller coaster inversions at the time, making them the obvious winner for the tallest. This was a very simple layout as well, but had some interesting theming elements, including a near miss in the second vertical loop. The first ride to successfully invert riders with upstop wheels in a safe layout was Corkscrew at Knott's Berry Farm. This is the oldest operating roller coaster to go upside down. It was made by Aerodynamics, which to say the least is a big trend on this list, and featured 2 corkscrews with a height of 30 feet. Doesn't seem too tall, but the fact that they were going upside down at all was very impressive at the time. And even though that this was a new concept, this would explode. And this would only hold the record for about a year, until May 8th, 1976. This is when a park only a few dozen miles away, Six Flags Magic Mountain, introduced the new revolution. This was the first coaster to feature a vertical loop and upstop wheels. Manufactured by Schwarzkopf, this opened up in 1976 and featured a single inversion, a 45-foot tall vertical loop. This ride still stands today as one of the most iconic looping roller coasters at all time at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Up next, we go from California to Ohio to talk about the former Geauga Lake when Double Loop opened. Another aero coaster, this ride, well, to say the least, featured 2 loops. The ride starts off with a drop, and then a turnaround, and then 2 65-foot tall vertical loops. This was the centerpiece of the ride, and the reason that this is on the video. This opened up in 1977 and closed on June 5th, 1978, when Loch Ness Monster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg opened. This was the first ever roller coaster to have interlocking loops that intertwined with each other, and the top loop went to a height of 82 feet at its peak. It's even more shocking when you realize this is only 3 years after the corkscrew model debuted, only at a height of 30 feet. Now, the Aero Looper is inverting riders over 80 feet in the air. So, how long is this record going to stay? At this point, looping roller coasters exploded all over the world, but despite that, Loch Ness Monster held the record for 3 days shy of a decade. On June 3rd, 1988, Six Flags Great America introduced Shockwave. Like I said, there is a lot of aerodynamics on this list, and with a height of 130 feet, a considerable jump from Loch Ness Monster, this loop, the first vertical loop on the ride, was the new tallest inversion in the world. This ride was an absolute monster. The Aero Mega Looper craze would not end though, as the very next year on April 15th, 1989, Six Flags Great Adventure would get their own in the Great American Scream Machine, and their vertical loop at 136 feet would now take the record. Having a layout very similar to Shockwave, this ride was just a little taller, a little faster, and at a completely different park with a different theme. Though it being similar, this ride was more loved and stayed open for a few more years. But in 1990, this record was beat once again with another Aero Mega Looper. This is Viper at Six Flags Magic Mountain. On April 7th, 1990, the ride was debuted with a 144-foot tall vertical loop. This held the record of the world's tallest inversion all the way from April 1990 to March of 1998, when we finally introduce a non-aero. For the first time in over 20 years, a non-aero looping coaster has made the list of the world's tallest inverting coaster, and this is Mr. Freeze. These were two premier rides inverted launch coasters that premiered at Six Flags Over Texas and Six Flags St. Louis as exact clones. The ride starts off with a launch, and it led into a 150-foot tall inverting top hat. Both of these rides still operate today, one operating in a reverse launch at Six Flags St. Louis, and the one in Texas having a forwards launch as of this year. Unfortunately, that could not be said with the next roller coaster on this list. This is Volcano the Blast Coaster, which operated from 1998 to 2018, but it held the record of the world's tallest inversion from its opening to 2013. At King's Dominion, the rollout, which was 155 foot tall at the top of the volcano, held the title. This element with the theming was very visually spectacular, and with the fire effects, it made this ride 10 times better. Though Cedar Fair currently held the record, they would outdo themselves on May 11th, 2013, when they introduced Gatekeeper at Cedar Point. From 2013 to 2019, the tallest point you can invert on a roller coaster was on Gatekeeper, going all the way up to 170 feet in the air, completely upside down, with its first element, the rollover dive drop. This coaster would hold the record for 6 years until 2019, and to say the least, 2019 was a huge year for this record, with 4 different roller coasters throughout the whole year holding the title. The first was another Cedar Fair B&M, Yukon Striker. The new B&M dive coaster at Canada's Wonderland, this would have a massive dive into an underground tunnel, leading into the inversion itself, a 187-foot tall Immelman. I've heard it looks absolutely massive in person, and for a few weeks, this is the highest you can go upside down on any roller coaster on the planet. That was until Falcon at Wuxi Sunac Land in China opened up on June 29th, 2019, with a 196.9 foot tall dive drop. This swing over drop is said to have a height of 196 feet and 10.5 inches, which is almost close to our current record holder. But only by 1.5 inches it is shorter. But finally, let's get to our current record holder. On July 13th, 2019, Steel Curtain opened to the public, and to say the least, this ride had an incredible beginning, with its dive drop, otherwise known as a Drachenfire dive drop. This is a 197 foot tall inversion. Looking down, 197 feet below, you can see the people look like ants. It starts off as a corkscrew, and then leads into a dive drop, sending you downward at near hypercoaster heights. And this is currently the record holder as of 2023. So let me know what you thought about it in the comments below, and let me know what your favorite coaster in this video was. Like always, check the link in the description for social media accounts, also my merch, and until next time, this is Cedar Flags, and I'll see you all later.